Britain, a country where people would rather stand in line than arrive on time, where explosive devices are mandatory at holiday dinners, and where thousands of grown adults compete annually to pull the ugliest face through a horse collar. These might sound like fiction and completely weird for people elsewhere, but it's the daily life for about 70 million British people. Today, we go through 12 of these absurd rituals that will help you understand why an entire culture chose beautiful insanity over boring efficiency. The British queue is essentially a bloodsport with invisible rules. At Tesco supermarkets across the nation, we maintain precisely 1 arm's length between bodies and never make eye contact. Heaven forbid you accidentally skip ahead at the post office in Manchester, and that's ground for social exile. Queue jumping triggers our special weapon, passive-aggressive tutting. Of course, that would be terribly uncouth. Instead, you'll receive a symphony of theatrical sighing and muttered comments. It might seem as a way of maintaining efficiency, but in a real sense, it's about preventing complete anarchy. According to Met Office research, British people spend 57 hours every year, that's over 2 full days, discussing weather. 60% admit it's our go-to small topic, beating family, holidays, and even current affairs. So, when a stranger at a bus stop says, "Bit grim today," they are performing a social ritual older than democracy and reaffirming their true British roots. We have been using the phrase, "lovely weather for ducks," since the 1840s without irony. It's emotional armor disguised as conversation, and which would sound utterly absurd in other parts of the world. Heinz's UK factory produces over 1 billion cans yearly. That's roughly 15 cans per British person. Back in 1927, Heinz invented beans on toast purely as a marketing stunt to sell more product. Interestingly, it worked spectacularly. We now consume more baked beans than the entire world combined. So ingrained is the beans on toast culture that the late Queen visited the factory for its 50th anniversary. Even Sir Patrick Stewart claims it's the only dish he can cook. And if you thought that was intriguing enough, a museum in Wales was dedicated exclusively to baked beans for 15 years. It's funny how we have been bamboozled into loving corporate propaganda, and we are absolutely fine with that. Neuroscientists studying comfort food discovered something that might sound like music to the ears of British people. Chip buddies triggered identical pleasure responses in the brain as chocolate. That's science validating what Lancashire mill workers knew in the 1800s. Sometimes you need starch wrapped in more starch. And the regional warfare as a result of this is brutal. Northerners in Manchester demand thick-cut chips from actual chip shops. Southerners dare suggest oven chips might suffice. Heresy! Even the names change every 20 miles. Chip Barm, Chip Bab, and Chip Cob. But in the end, it's yet another British thing that's totally normal here, but makes no sense at all elsewhere. In 1965, building regulations changed, officially permitting mixer taps throughout Britain. That's 6 decades ago. Yet, when you walk into any modern house, you are almost guaranteed to find separate taps installed specifically to maintain Victorian authenticity. The original logic? Hot water tanks bred bacteria, so separation prevented contamination of drinking water. Sensible to an extent. Except, we've had safe plumbing for 6 decades now. Hotels in Bath that install mixer taps receive complaint letters from elderly guests offended by the convenience. We have developed the splash and dash technique, where we rapidly alternate hands between scalding and Arctic. And somehow, we convinced ourselves this constitutes cultural heritage. Other nations have solutions. We have tradition and third-degree burns. Christmas crackers contain silver fulminate. For those not in the know, this is a legitimate explosive compound discovered in 1800. We detonate them at dinner tables nationwide. They trace their origin to 1847, when a confectioner visited France, saw bonbons, thought needs more danger, and added explosives. The 130 million pounds we spend annually purchases tissue paper crowns and jokes unchanged since Victoria's reign. What's orange and sounds like a parrot? A carrot. That's the pinnacle of cracker humor. Luxury versions cost £1,000 per box. The jokes remain equally terrible. Protocol demands wearing paper crowns throughout the meal. Everyone looks equally ridiculous. But that's the point. It's enforced humility through controlled explosions. Imagine being compelled to pay £159 annually or face £1,000 fines. That's the fee for merely owning equipment capable of receiving broadcast television. The BBC collects £3.8 billion yearly through this system, funding everything from Planet Earth to celebrity diving competitions. TV licensing dispatches 100 million threatening letters annually, compelling people to pay. Detector vans supposedly identify unlicensed viewing, but it's anyone's guess as to whether they really work. Once again, good old Britain goes for bureaucratic intimidation, because apparently that's more preferable. If this made you question your knowledge about Britain, make sure you subscribe to the channel to learn more about what seems normal but would leave anyone else speechless. Introducing yet another British norm, the pantomime, a Victorian theatrical tradition where men dress as women, women play male leads, and audiences shout predetermined phrases at actors like they are participating in some collective fever dream. Former soap stars rake in 100 grand for 6 weeks of getting absolutely battered with foam while cracking filthy jokes that kids don't clock, but which amuse exhausted parents. Pantomimes generate £150 million annually, keeping regional theaters financially viable. The format hasn't changed since 1880. It's simultaneously awful and brilliant, and that perfectly summarizes everything British. We operate over 25,000 roundabouts. To put that into perspective, that's more per mile than anywhere on Earth. And because that was not barmy enough, a genius in Swindon decided to nest 5 smaller ones around a big one in the middle, christening it the Magic Roundabout. Milton Keynes went properly mental with 130 roundabouts, turning the whole town into Britain's favorite motorway joke. Now, to be fair, they do slash serious crashes by 3/4 compared to old crossroads. But the problem is that we have gone absolutely roundabout mad, sticking them in spots where there's barely 2 cars a day, some with essentially one way in and the same way out. A typical British thing. McVitie's maintains a department of professional dunkologists. Their job? To scientifically test biscuit submersion capabilities. That's based on the fact that annually, we submerge 55 billion biscuits, with 740 million experiencing catastrophic structural failure mid-dunk. Based on the dunkologist's findings, a proper technique requires a 45-degree entry angle, 2-second submersion, and an immediate mouth transfer. Simply put, the gravitas with which we approach cookie architecture would horrify actual structural engineers and foreigners alike, but standards require maintenance. Every May, volunteers pursue an 8-pound wheel of double Gloucester cheese down Cooper's Hill in Gloucestershire, reaching speeds of up to 70 miles per hour. Capturing the cheese is physically impossible, and casualties are statistically guaranteed. Participants casually execute death waiver paperwork before competing. So popular is the event that audiences exceed 5,000 despite official safety cancellations. Britain has also perfected bog snorkeling or peat swimming, wellywanging, which is boot-throwing competitions, shin kicking, that's self-explanatory, and gurning championships, which is, get this, making grotesque faces through horse collars. The annual revenue margin for all this is a whopping £2 million. It's deliberately organized stupidity receiving heritage status. Other nations have athletics, but somehow we have institutionalized absurdity with trophy ceremonies. From 73,000 operational units, only 8,000 functioning telephone boxes survive, yet 2,000 possess Grade 2 heritage protection. That's the official architectural preservation status. BT allows villagers to purchase boxes for £1, transforming them into libraries, medical equipment stations, and even nightclubs. Communities even go to an extent of fundraising thousands to maintain telecommunications infrastructure nobody uses. However, tourist photography remains mandatory. We are simply preserving functionally obsolete technology because it appears authentically British. What peculiarities stunned you the most? Let us know in the comments.